Hello and welcome to Talking Books. I'm Jill de Villiers. Nobody likes to talk about failure. It is something we'd rather sweep under the carpet than face head on, especially publicly. But failure and the ability to recover from it, pick yourself up and carry on or start all over again is part and parcel of being an entrepreneur. Joining me now to discuss these books, Do, Fail, Learn, Repeat, The Truth Behind Building Businesses, is entrepreneur Nicholas Haralambous. Thanks for joining us, Nicholas.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, how many businesses have you had?
Since I was 16, it's been about 11 or 12 businesses, and of those, the first 8 were back-to-back failures.
Now, how do you keep on going when that happens?
I think I was really lucky that my parents taught me a level of resilience, and I talk about that word very specifically in the book, that you kind of have to learn that failure is not an end point, and I'm trying to get people to reframe the way they think of failure. So I like to think of failure as a through point. It's something you have to work through so that you can learn a lesson and then repeat the experience of building a business or whatever it is you're working on and get better at it through the failure.
But how do you actually get through that? Did your dad instill that in you, or?
No, unfortunately, my parents, as any good parents, they wanted me to be better than they were and have more than they had. So they never wanted me to be an entrepreneur. They wanted me to get a stable job like any good Greek parent. They wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. So they didn't help me understand this. Looking back on my dad's experience as an entrepreneur, I was able to see how he suffered and the depression that comes with failure. And I was able to recognize that in him and then understand it was happening to me. The practicalities of failing, let's not mince words. Failure it's a trauma. It's not a fun thing to go through. But I've kind of managed to understand that those traumas are beneficial to me. There's actually something called post-traumatic growth, that lots of scientific research is being done on how humans rebound after we've suffered a trauma, whether it's better relationships with your family, a better life decision. And I just get through the trauma because I know that there's a point on the other side where I'm going to be able to look back and learn something new.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you get to this point of reaching that resilience?
It's taken me a long time to understand that you do have to suffer sometimes to have the success, and getting to this point was just habitual. I built a business and then failed and was like, well, what am I going to do now? Just go and build another one. And I do believe it's kind of entrenched in me. It's very polarizing to say, and not a lot of people agree with me, but I believe that entrepreneurs are born. I think that you want to do this and then you hone that skill. I don't think everyone should be an entrepreneur. So I've just managed to get through it because it's what I know how to do. In the same way that a good soccer player knew they were good when they were a kid, but then developed their skills as they got older.
Tell me about your first business, your band that you had.
So straight into university, I was looking for some friends, and luckily in my res there were some people who played music and I played guitar. And we kind of got together and over a couple of years became good at playing music. But I've subsequently learned that being good at anything is just getting you into the game. Being good doesn't give you the right to be successful. And we were good, but we kind of weren't really good at marketing. And this is actually my favorite failure. One of my favorite stories around the band is we were touring Joburg and we played to an audience of 1 because we just didn't market. And that was my first real experience of you can be good and you can practice, but if you don't have anyone buying your product, you don't have a business.
You also said in that section of the book that you didn't practice enough. There was also that element in it.
Absolutely. I've read a lot of books in the past, and one of them was about the Beatles and how they practiced. And they went off to Germany for a year and played 3 or 4 different gigs every day for a year. That's practice. That is honing a skill. And we did not do that. We practiced 2 or 3 times a week and we got good enough to be in front of people, but we weren't great musicians. And there is a level of greatness that you have to aspire to really become successful. It's coupled with hard work, but that level of greatness and acquiring the skills, I think, is an imperative part of becoming successful.
And then from there you went on, you studied journalism, and then you went into freelance journalism.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a natural progression for any journalism graduate is you want to go and be a writer. And I thought that I wanted to. Since I was 7, all I wanted to do was write. This book is kind of an accomplishment for me from when I was 7. And I thought that freelancing was the way to go. But it turns out that's really hard. And at the time, and this is about 13 years ago, it was a very old boys club and it was hard to get work. On top of it, rates are really cheap. It's hard to make a living as a freelance journalist. So that did not last long. I was not cut out for it. I also realized that I wanted to suffer for myself, not for someone else's stories. So that didn't last long.
You also say that people who freelance sometimes say that they are entrepreneurs, but that doesn't mean that you're an entrepreneur. What is the difference?
That's another controversial thing I say. I don't believe that if you are selling a service and you're a party of one, that you're necessarily an entrepreneur. I believe you're doing great things and you're a great creative if you're a designer or a developer, but you're not building a business. And for me, entrepreneurs build businesses. Yes, there are lots of one-person businesses in the world, and more power to you. If you can have $1 million one-person business, that's the dream. But I would argue that you're a one-person business. You're not an entrepreneur. For me, it's about scaling things and plugging holes in the world that you see. And it's a very subtle difference, but I think a freelancer is someone selling skill, and a business person, an entrepreneur, is someone building something.
Now, I think the most successful business that you had was the socks business.
Which is still running today. We're almost 6 in November.
And how did that come about? Did you expect it to be successful?
No, I never go into a business expecting success. To be honest, I don't even know what success means anymore. I think everyone's got so many different ideas of what that is. So I go into businesses wanting to scratch an itch that I have. That's the best way I can describe it. If I feel like I need something to be done and no one else is doing it, I just go out and do it. And this particular business, I wanted to have fun, bold, daring socks made in South Africa from a premium fabric. I wanted them to be light enough to ship anywhere in the world, so whatever the product was. And we wanted to build the business with 5,000 Rand over 6 weeks and turn a profit in 30 days. And we found a factory in Cape Town that makes socks, and 10 days after launching, we had tripled our money or quadrupled our money. And now we have 3 stores and a website that ships around the world.
Fantastic. But you don't stop there. You have several other ideas.
Yes. I mean, I've always got ideas. And part of the problem is curating them and saying no to a lot of things. So right now I'm very focused on stabilizing the business because, let's be honest, retail is really in a tough space in South Africa. So at nickharry.com, we're trying to pull back and just stabilize through this tough retail space in South Africa at the moment. So that's where my focus is, and obviously writing and promoting books.
Now tell me, have you ever had a mentor?
No, I've never had an actual human being that sat in front of me and sat me down for a couple of hours a week and said, this is what you're doing wrong. And it's something that I've always wanted, but never really found, weirdly enough. I put myself in a lot of networks that involve entrepreneurs and smart people, but none of them have really become mentors in the traditional sense. So what I did was I read a lot of books, probably 2 or 3 books a month for a long time, and tried to gather the lessons I could out of those books. And when I stopped looking for a mentor, I started finding people who could help me. And I have had some interesting people, investors, board members, who've kind of given me guidance over the years. But I do find that the mentor relationship is one that a lot of entrepreneurs use as an excuse not to start. Oh, I can't start my business because I don't have a mentor. And I just think that's an excuse. You've got to go out and do it, and then they'll find you. They'll come and find you.
I think another excuse is as well the business plan.
Oh, yeah.
Because I cannot start the business until I have this proper business plan properly sorted out and approved and know that everything is going to go right.
Absolutely.
And you, how do you feel?
Yeah, so one of the chapters is titled Business Plans are for MBAs, for people who study business, not people who do business. And it's really the first word of the title is do. I tried at one point to do a business plan. It ended up being 35 pages long. It had no relevance or importance. It used all the big buzzwords, and we had no product. And in my experience over the last 15 years of building things, the best businesses build things. They don't build business plans. Sometimes those are relevant if you're pitching to investors, but I only really put those together once I had a business and knew what my business did and knew how we were making money. So I try to steer away from business plans and try to push people towards the do part. If you have something you want to do, just go do it, and then you'll figure the rest out later.
Now, how do you find out what to do? What is the right thing for you to do? How do you determine that?
Yeah, that's always very complicated to answer because it's so personal. For me, my work and my life are intimately integrated. I don't believe in balance, I believe in integration. So I have to believe in the things that I work on. I like to work with people that are the best at what they do. And sometimes those things overlap, the idea and the person. A lot of times they don't, and you have to find the people. For me, I try and find scalable markets to build things in. So for Nick Harry, as an example, we're trying to export our product now because South Africa is quite a small e-commerce market. So we try and look at big markets, and we try and look at products that not everyone is doing or solutions that not everyone has. If you are going into a cluttered market, you have to have a unique selling proposition. And then things become kind of complicated. So we look at, when we're building businesses, myself and my partner, we look for gaps that haven't been filled yet and scalability.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long have you been in this partnership?
So I've been with my life partner for 13 years, and she is my business partner too, and we've been working together for about 4.5 years.
Now that is amazing. I always wonder how couples manage to work together and not fight.
We fought for the first year, probably a lot, and we had to come up with very rigid rules on when we can talk about work and when we can talk about anything else. So I would get in the habit of coming home from our office, and we would talk about work through dinner and through watching TV and into bed and in the morning. And eventually she was like, just stop, we can't do this. So that triggered us to implement a system called Radical Candor. It's a really interesting way of approaching communication in organizations. You are brutally honest, but without ego. And that ego part is the hardest one. But we're very honest with each other. We can say, listen, I really don't like what you've done here. I like you, but I just don't like that. And you have to separate your work from you. And that's how we kind of managed to make it work.
Wow. Sure.
Yeah.
And you've had several, just to get back to failure, you've had several failures. How do you deal with that on a financial basis and on an emotional basis?
So I'll deal with the emotional basis first. It's really tough. I think you need a lot of grown-up attitude towards yourself. You need to not be petty and petulant. And that's taken me a long time to learn. In the first 5 or 6 failures, it was very hard on myself personally. I wasn't able to look at the big market and go, hey, maybe it wasn't me. Maybe there's some things out of my control. Also, you struggle to learn the lessons when you can't see beyond yourself. So I've kind of stepped back, and I look at the businesses as separate from myself. And that was really important to start with, is your failures in business aren't your failures as a human. And failure for me is something to learn, not to suffer. So that's how I separated that. Financially, that is a really difficult one because I like to risk things. I have a very high propensity for risk. So I put my money into myself. I believe it's one of the best investments you can make is in yourself, because I have the ability to create wealth. I'm dependent on myself for that. Yes, I could put money into stocks, but then it's someone else's job. So I do risk a lot, and when things don't work out, sometimes I'm on the hook for that. And that just means that you should only always risk what you can afford to. And that applies to your businesses, your stocks, your investments, your car, whatever. And a lot of people don't understand that. Like, you don't need a flashy car. That's going to put you in more debt than starting a business. And that's how I look at life. I'd rather put my money into my businesses and try and make more than keep it in a savings account all the time.
Nick, thank you so much. I could chat to you for much longer, but we've come to the end of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much for coming in. And my guest today, Nicholas Haralambous, and his book is Do, Fail, Learn, Repeat, The Truth Behind Building Businesses. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.